Assalamualaikum, my name is Muhammad Azrishan. I want to talk about acknowledge. All praise to be to Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala for providing with us to be strength to finish our group assignment. This report is created to order to fulfill the standard of the subject economy. We provide the relevant information in our report based on the instruction provided in the Google Classroom, with the direction of support from Management Level Leiden. Thank you to our professor encouraging the introduce us despite the fact Gudin a challenge at her pension.
Hi, my name is Nurshela Natasha, and I want to share with you guys introduction and background of Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea is a tropical country in Middle Africa. It is one of the smallest countries in Africa and is bordered by Cameroon, Gabon, the Gulf of Guinea, and Sao Tome and Principe in the Gulf. The government system is a republic. The chief of state is the president and the head of government is the prime minister. Equatorial Guinea has a traditional economic system in which the allocation of available resources is made of the basis of primitive methods and citizens engage in subsistence agriculture. After 190 years of Spanish rule, Equatorial Guinea gained independence in 1968. It is one of Africa's smallest countries, consisting of a mainland territory and 5 inhabited islands. Malabo is located on the island of Baiko, approximately 25 kilometers from the Cameroonian coast in the Gulf of Guinea. Between 1968 and 1979, autocratic President Francisco Marques Juma almost completely destroyed the country's political, economic, and social institutions before being deposed in a violent coup by his nephew Teodoro Obiang Jema Masogo. President Obiang has been in power since October 1979. He has been re-elected several times since 1989, most recently in 2016. Although the country has been a nominal constitutional democracy since 1991, presidential and legislative elections have been held since 1996. The president has nearly complete control over the political system and has erected legal and bureaucratic barriers to political opposition. Equatorial Guinea experienced rapid economic growth in the early years of the 21st century as a result of the 1990 discovery of large offshore oil reserves. Production peaked in late 2004 and has gradually declined since then, despite aggressive searches for new oil fields. Despite the country's economic windfall from oil production, which has resulted in massive increases in government revenue in recent years, lower global oil prices since 2014 and depreciating oil fields have put significant strain on the state budget. While oil revenues have primarily been used to develop infrastructure, corruption has hampered socio-economic development, and there have been only minor improvements in education. The population standard of living Equatorial Guinea is still working to diversify its economy and attract more foreign investment. Current environmental issues, deforestation, forest are threatened by agricultural expansion, fires and grazing, desertification, water pollution, tap water is unfit for human consumption, and wildlife conservation. International treaties on the environment, biodiversity, climate change, Kyoto Protocol on climate change, Paris Agreement on climate change, desertification, endangered species, hazardous wastes, law of sea marine dumping, London Convention, nuclear test ban, protection of the ozone layer, ship pollution, wetland ratified but not signed, comprehensive ban on nuclear tests. Military and security exploitation of oil and gas deposits beginning in the 1990s has driven economic growth in Equatorial Guinea. A recent rebasing of GDP resulted in an upward revision of the size of the economy by approximately 30%. Forestry and farming are minor components of GDP. Although pro-independence, Equatorial Guinea counted on cocoa production for hard currency earnings. The neglect of the rural economy since independence has diminished the potential for agriculture-led growth. Subsistence farming is the dominant form of livelihood. Declining revenue from hydrocarbon production, high levels of infrastructure expenditures, lack of economic diversification, and corruption have pushed the economy into decline in recent years, and limited improvements in the general population's living conditions. Equatorial Guinea's real GDP growth has been weak in recent years, averaging minus 0.5% per year from 2010 to 2014 because of a declining hydrocarbon sector. Inflation remained very low in 2016, down from an average of 4% in 2014. As a middle-income country, Equatorial Guinea is now ineligible for most low-income World Bank and the IMF funding. The government has been widely criticized for its lack of transparency and misuse of oil revenues, and has attempted to address this issue by working toward compliance with the Extractive Industries Initiative. U.S. foreign assistance to Equatorial Guinea is limited in part because of U.S. restrictions pursuant to the Trafficking Victims Protection. Equatorial Guinea hosted 2 economic diversification symposia in 2014 that focused on attracting in 5 sectors. It is agriculture and animal ranching, fishing, mining and petrochemicals, tourism, and financial services. Undeveloped mineral resources include gold, zinc, diamonds, columbite, tantalite, and other base metals. In 2017, Equatorial Guinea signed a preliminary agreement with Ghana to sell liquefied natural gas (LNG) as oil production wins. The government believes LNG could provide a boost to revenues, but it will require large investments and a long lead times to develop.
Reducing macroeconomic imbalance and maintaining fiscal stability. Rebuild macroeconomy before using hydrocarbon revenue windfall. The government needs to fiscal priority stabilize the economy with the continued support of the banking system and variable population in Equatoria. Next, maintain fiscal stability over the medium term. As hydrocarbon production in secular decline, policy adjustment are need to maintain fiscal stability with stimulating the hydrocarbon sector and proceed inclusive over the medium term. Next, our 2 points will be explained by Muhammad Nur Shafiq. That's all for me.
Strengthening the banking sector. Long-standing vulnerabilities in the banking sector were further aggravated by the pandemic. Key concerns are the high non-performing loans or driven by the government areas with construction firms and the revelation of undercapitalized banks, alignment of capital definition with Basel II at end 2019 prompt steps are need to strengthen banking sector soundness, and the government should accelerate its plan for clearing domestic areas and work with Quebec towards recapitalization of any insolvent bank. Beyond this, the government should accelerate the implementation of new mechanisms to resolve commercial and non-credit disputes with a view to reducing non-performing loans. Finally, the government should continue to work closely with Quebec to improve other identified deficiencies in the banking system over the medium term, and work with BAC to improve access to financial service and strengthen financial inclusion. Diversification and a climate resilient economy. Intensify actions to improve governance, enhance transparency and the fight against corruption. Then, the authorities have implemented several macro-critical governance reforms, including an anti-corruption framework and revenue administration reforms. However, reform efforts need to be accelerated to address remaining severe governance and corruption vulnerabilities via a comprehensive and credible implementation of the structural reform agenda to yield substantial macroeconomic dividends. The reform agenda is detailed in the government's 2019 action plan for addressing governance weakness, increasing transparency and fighting corruption. Efforts are also needed to fully implement related measures or measures contemplated as commitments under the 2021 Rapid Financing Instrument request, along with outstanding measures from the Extended Fund Facility. Boost effort to any non-hydrocarbon growth and update Development Plan 2035 appropriately contemplates private sector-led economic diversification and environmental sustainability. Key initiatives implemented include the establishment of a one-stop shop for investment to help improve the business environment, the removal of the domestic partner requirement for foreign investors, and the new commission to improve port operations. A list of state assets for privatization through outright sale or through management contracts has been published. Additionally, plans to develop tourism are being contemplated to contribute to inclusive growth. Additional measures are needed, including the preparation of an asset sales plan based on open and transparent international tenders, the establishment of an investment promotion agency, establishing a tourism strategy, and a comprehensive plan to enhance skill of the local workforce. facilitate the building of a climate-resilient economy. The authorities have ratified the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and launched the RED program with the key goal of limiting deforestation and forest degradation. Towards this end, work has started on a land use plan with FAO. These efforts need to be scaled up while carefully managing the circular decline in the hydrocarbon sector, including by avoiding incentive for early shutdown of declining wells.
Hi, I am Nur Raja Izzati with the Masuki. Now I'm going to talk about the monetary policy and fiscal policy. The first is I'm going to talk monetary policy. The CEMAC Regional Central Bank has determined monetary policy. The Bank of Central African States and given priority to controlling inflation as well as the pact between the CFA-BEA French and the euro is maintained. In this case, it will continue to rely on indirect instruments such as financing and mandatory reserve requirements to control the money supply. Monetary was conducted in 2011 in a favorable economic context until Equatorial Guinea had no resource to monetary financing, contrary to what had happened in the previous year. Such a thing would have a good effect as it does not incur debt in the banking system as a whole. At the end of December 2011, the monetary situation in the country showed an increase in most of the money aggregates and a deterioration in domestic credit, a consolidation and a rise in foreign assets. We've recorded a strong increase of 37.4% over the previous year, and with the state in a net standard position. Furthermore, the net loan stock amounted to XAF 702.9 billion, up 21% from the previous year. The breakdown of credits to the economy shows short-term credits of XAF 590.2 billion and medium and long-term credits of XAF 112.7 billion against XAF 489.9 billion and XAF 91.3 billion respectively at the end of 2010. The broad money supply M2 rose by 16.74% compared with the end of 2010. A breakdown of its composition shows that monetary availability rose by 19.59%. Cost money accounted for 9.8% of the structure of the money supply at the end of 2011 compared with 11.9% in 2010. Down 4.21% from XAF 110.99 billion at the end of 2010 to XAF 100.20 billion at the end of 2011. Inflation was higher in Equatorial Guinea than in the other CFE French countries. There were inflationary pressures arising from the increase in public spending related to the AU Summit and African Cup of Nations and rising food price, local supply being much reduced. The inflation rate should reach 6.5% in 2013, far above the CEMAC 3% convergence target. The oil bomb has produced inflationary effects with include significant increase in labor costs and non-traded service, including property. Now I'm going to talk about fiscal policy. Fiscal policy was expansionary in 2011 in spite of the efforts of the authorities to cut public spending. The overall balance remained negative in 2011. The deficit was put at 2.3% of GDP, better than 4.8% in 2010, but it could deteriorate in 2012 to 3% of GDP. Although oil price rose and production recovered, total revenue stayed around 30% of GDP in 2011. Total spending in 2011 fell slightly, but even so amounted to 32.3% of GDP. The primary budget deficit, including oil, considered to be most relevant budgetary indicator for an oil-based economy, remains high in comparison with other countries in the region, at 97% of GDP, including oil in 2011. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the African Development Bank, AFDB, the IMF believes the budgetary deficit, excluding oil, should be about 47% of GDP in 2011 to ensure a sustainable budget. In the medium-term budget, sustainability depends on the success of fiscal reform started in 2008. Oil tax revenues accounted for about 90% of total tax income in 2011, thanks to the laws on oil and gas in 2006 and their implementation from 2006 to 11 have swollen the state's coffers. The minimum royalties rate rose from 10% to 13% of gross oil production. Minimum state participation in oil activities was set at 20%, income tax on business at 25%, which applies to net profits from oil activities, has grown in line with GDP, but revenues from taxes on non-oil activities stagnated at around 2.4% of GDP in 2011. Reforms are underway to increase non-oil tax revenue in agreement with the Central African Economic and Monetary Community, but seemingly with only moderate success.
Now, I want to talk about direct control. This country has 1,626,000 acres of tropical forest, that means 58% of its area. Rising sea level caused by climate change exposed the country to flooding and coastal erosion, threatening intrusion and vital biodiversity reserve. Equatorial Guinea has created a plan to ensure national resource management compatible with economic development. The National Plan of Climate Change Adaptation prioritizes resilience of ecosystem and community. Implementing intervention in the NDC CDN 2015 will require about 3.64 billion. The country's economic crisis may, however, affect the capacity to mobilize climate change results. That's all for me.
The conclusion: the country has 1,626 million acres of tropical forest, 58% of its area, because deforestation at an estimated annual rate of 0.9% is one of the primary factors in declining biodiversity. The National Investment Plan RED Plus 2020 proposed a green economy model that aims to protect the forest and contribute to sustainable development. So what we can learn from this topic, this country, we need to take note of the economy of a country, especially the economic problems of the country. In addition, we must also be aware of the effects of government policy implemented by country. That's all from me. Thank you.